Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Welcome, everyone, to today's the Ed Collab Gathering Workshop number 3. Today's workshop is presented by Chantal Francois and Kim Kelly. Chantal Francois is a member of the Ed Collab team and has spent years teaching in urban public schools and researching and writing about them. Kim Kelly is an 18-year teacher of in the New York public school system, and on the side she is a YA author and she blogs. Now, they will be with us today to talk to you about give me one second, empowering readers through agency and metacognition. Now, please remember that to join in on the conversation, you can tweet your comments to the Ed Collaborative Gathering, put in a physical space, an actual space, and the number 3. Over to you, Chantal and Kim.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to join you today for our presentation. We are going to dive right in. I'm going to share my screen with you. So Kim and I have worked together for several years at Eastside Community High School. It's a small public school in New York City in Manhattan. I work as the school's literacy coach there, and Kim is an 11th and 12th grade English teacher there. So for the first little bit, I'll frame the talk explaining our ideas about metacognition. And next, Kim and I will discuss ways to support students to be more metacognitive in our classes. So I want to just share with you a couple of, and also, if you have, just like Vivian just mentioned, if you have any comments that you'd like to share with us, any questions that you have, we would absolutely love to hear from you. You can tweet us at these two, at the hashtag above here on this slide, or you can also tweet me at my particular handle as well, and we'll see if we can take some of your questions as well. So I'd like to just talk to you first, thinking about a little bit of metacognition. You know what, I'm going to also see if I can just wave and say hi to you as well. So that we have a common language for discussing what Kim and I mean when we're talking about metacognition today, I think this definition is going to be useful for our talk. It is the ability to monitor one's current state of learning. So really anything that we can think about to understand one's cognitive process. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why should we engage in doing the work of supporting students around metacognition. As someone who spent a lot of time teaching, observing classrooms, and working with teachers, I find that we spend so much time thinking about what we're going to teach and what our lesson is going to look like and its own execution, often at the expense of how we're going to hold students accountable for their learning and for their own execution of the skills and strategies during their own learning process. And it was actually Chris Lehman, our dear colleague, who illuminated this problem to me a few years ago when he said something that was really eye-opening. He suggested that the mini lesson, of course, is important, but the most important time during our lesson is really kids' independent practice, when we are engaging in the small group work and conferring to enhance their learning. So what I want us to be thinking about for today's workshop is what are ways that we can hold students accountable for drawing on a repertoire of skills and strategies, the ones that you'll teach not just today, but also across the week, across a unit, and also across the year. So how do we apply this definition of metacognition, this monitoring of one's own understanding, to the teaching of literature and reading? Well, we want our students to have control of their reading, past, present, and future. This is about students' knowledge of strategies, the control of their own actions, and their reasons why they read, their purposes for reading as well. We want to put students' minds in charge of the decisions that they will make every day and every moment as they're reading so that they can execute and employ those skills and strategies effectively. The thing that I think is important about metacognition is that it allows students to solidify their thinking about a topic, to develop their own theories, and also to identify strategies that they find important. So the more that you know about yourself as a reader, the more likely you'll be able to identify areas of success and needed areas of growth. I also want to engage students in deliberate, concentrated practice around reading. And I was just rereading this week this book by John Hattie, Visible Learning for Teachers. And one of the things that he was really advocating for was that, sure, repetitive practice is great, but research finds that repetitive practice with monitoring and reflection that is deliberate is even more valuable. We can apply this as well to most activities that we engage in where practice improves our work over time. That could be an athletic sport, it can be video games, and even our own teaching in the classroom. You can practice dribbling for thousands of hours and get a little better, that's sure. But odds are that you're going to get much, much better if you can watch yourself, if you can identify areas to improve, and if you can repeat and reflect and get feedback so that you can practice again. So the same logic that we're applying to that kind of practice, we can also apply to the practice of reading. So I want to show you, and Kim and I are going to both show you, different ways that you can do this across the year. So again, we are going to start with talking a little bit about end of lesson reflections, but also end with some end of semester reflections, and I want to show you a brief example of small group instruction too. So some examples of end of lesson reflections I want to start with. And so this is one way to hold students accountable, but they also can give students insight and you insight into what they need for next time. So when readers are talking about a strategy, it helps them understand it more deeply. With the questions that I've posted here, I want students to understand that this learning is not in isolation what they're doing today, that they can draw on all that they've learned today now as their repertoire of strategies that can actually help them in future instances of learning. I have come to learn that so much of our teaching is about building students' confidence in what they're learning, not just the skills on their own. And in effect, I find that these questions enable us to do just that. What you learn today is not just about the content, and it's not just about today, but it's actually about work that's going to fortify your minds to come. And all the better for you to be able to articulate it than me. So, for instance, in a classroom, teachers could ask students at the end of a lesson or even during a lesson, can you just jot for a minute with a partner, what did I learn today about myself that as a reader today that I can use in the days and weeks to come? Or in what other situations can I use this strategy? Or students can reflect with a partner. What do I understand about myself as a reader now that I didn't understand before? Or what was most confusing to me about the work we did today? And how can I teach others what I've learned? I want to show you another example of an end of lesson reflection. And this is a rubric around accountable talk or a discussion. We've been experimenting with this a lot at Eastside this year, using rubrics asking students to use rubrics pretty regularly to assess themselves as another way to monitor their understanding of how they're engaging in tasks. So periodically throughout units that feature whole class texts, students engage in discussions where they develop ideas about the characters, themes, authors' messages, and dialogue with one another. A format like this takes practice, but I've found that it's a powerful way for students to demonstrate their understanding of the literature across the unit and a great way for them to prepare for their literary essays. At the end of each discussion, students often complete a rubric that asks them to rate themselves and to defend them. So here's an example that I just did with 9th grade students. They're reading the Greek tragedy play, Medea by Euripides, and they spent this beautiful half an hour discussing whether the main character's actions were contradictory or a true expression of who she really was. And notice that on this rubric, it's more than just, did you talk during the discussion, but really about how was the quality of the talk. So I see things in the exceeds box that says things like recognizes when to step up or step back, elevates discussion by synthesizing several peers' ideas, and so on. And so at the end of this, the students had a little time to rate themselves and write a little bit about why they rated themselves the way they did. And it was really so amazing to hear just how much self-knowledge they had gained, not just about their own contribution, but to the collective process of discussing ideas. Something that they've been working on a lot had been about avoiding repetitive ideas, and they were able to talk about the nuance that they were able to raise this time in their discussion, bringing in multiple forms of evidence to be able to generate new learning. So again, thinking about this idea that metacognition is a way to monitor one's current state of learning, the students are actively engaged in this process, both individually and also together, to be able to negotiate their learning and to name what they know. So I'm going to also share with you an example of how this might go at the end of a unit as well. This is actually more of a writing example. I taught 10th grade English last year, and we taught an editorial unit where students had to develop their position on a social issue of their choice and write an original piece that drew from a range of evidence. So we looked at models and we focused on organization. Students did research, and they also focused on elements of craft as well. And each of these elements also appeared on the rubric that we used. So it's true, students could have just handed in the final draft of their editorials, and that would have been the end of the unit. But before they did, I asked them to reflect on the strategies that they had used that improved their draft, from the rough to the final drafts. And the reflection just asks a few very straightforward questions. Of all the things that you learned, choose a strategy that you think you were able to own really well. Discuss an example of the strategy in the editorial. How did you use it in your draft? And also talk a little bit about why an editorial writer might want to include this strategy in their writer, what effect might it have on readers, and how might you use this feature in editorial writing pieces in the future. So again, thinking back to our definition of metacognition being the ability to monitor one's current state of learning, that this was powerful because it allowed students to solidify all they had learned in the unit, to be able to name them, and also to be able to gain control and awareness of their own process, which I believe fortifies their thinking as readers and writers. So I'm going to continue and share another idea that we have also worked on for several years at Eastside. And maybe I'll actually pause right now. I don't know, Vivian, if there are any comments or questions that people have so far. Okay, I'll just keep on going.
Hi, Chantal.
Yeah.
Sorry. Just wanted to clarify that we need to update the hashtag. It is actually the Ed Collab Gathering space 3. Hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering space 3. And you'll notice I shared that with you in my group chat. And so right now I do not have any questions. But
okay, perfect. Thank you. So you can use that hashtag. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share. So another example that I'd love to share with you is the work that we do with students to reflect about their learning at the end of every semester at our school. So the students must actually spend time to defend their learning in every content area in grades 6 to 12 in front of small groups of students, other Eastside teachers, and outside guests. The entire experience is really an exercise in metacognition. During the roundtable, students present a letter reflecting on their learning in class, and they typically perform an on-demand task in line with the skills and strategies that they were expected to learn across the semester. They also have to answer questions from the small group. So I want to share with you one example from a 10th grade student who was reflecting in his letter, and it actually is called a cover letter at Eastside. So this is the beginning of his letter, and I'm just gonna focus on the last part of the letter because of some of the things that he said that particularly stood out to me. And so he writes, in English this semester, we wrote and read a lot of things that need to be changed, about a lot of things that need to be changed. We read about books whose authors nurtured and tortured their characters in order to show something wrong and dark and terrible. We wrote speeches about what mattered to us and about what we want to stop or change or improve it. We learned about master narratives and their invisible, unquestioned hold on society. We learned that things have gotten better, but they aren't good yet. We aren't done yet. We learned that there is still more work to do, and that work is what mattered most to be in English this semester. That idea that I was talking, walking, breathing hope. So this student here is able to do a lot around metacognition. We see evidence of a mind at work here, of trying to look back at what he's learned in the semester to really shape his identity as an English student, as a reader, as a writer, as a person who delivers speeches. This student shows some awareness of what he's gained in ways that seem lifelong and not fleeting, which I find really powerful. So finally, I want to share with you a video of a few students exercising their metacognitive awareness as well. I came across an article this week about metacognition that suggested that inviting students to teach what they are learning enables them to synthesize and solidify their thinking and has a valuable impact on their metacognition and overall learning process. I worked with a couple of teachers, this time at a different school, to conduct a 7th grade small group where the student Mariah was the teacher, and she had already demonstrated that she could navigate a nonfiction passage well, and we wanted her to demonstrate how to do that in front of 3 of her peers. So I'm going to take out my headphones here. And the volume is a little low, but there are subtitles, so you can watch that. It's about, I think about 4 minutes we're going to watch, and then I'll talk about that in a little bit.
So I see this chunk, I read it, and it talks about Richard Nixon and how he was president in November 1968, and his plan for ending the war was not actually winning it. So that makes me think that this is the arc they're meaning by not winning the war. So I read further on to the plan, which it talks about in the intro, and so I read furthermore, and it said that South Vietnamese armies would take over most of the fighting, and the U.S. troops would be, the Vietnam army would be trained by the U.S. troops. So it made me think that the author's perspective is that the U.S. troops won't be winning the war, but instead the troops of Vietnam will win the war.
I definitely think you furthermore. I think that you have a good idea so far. about the first part. And you're doing good because I like how when she read that, you got a sense of idea, and when she went to that, since it's in the same place, you thought about like what the author was thinking, and that's why. And I think that if you was to go furthermore and keep doing that for each section, then you never know. You read it over, and you build up one whole big thing. You just have a whole, big perspective about what the author is thinking and overall. Because since it's on one whole topic, you're gonna have either a bigger idea than what you're thinking so far. So I think you're in good shape.
I think I can do. Well, I say that you did really good, and well, since you did really good, I guess it's just me that I can't really process the information. I still don't really get how like the part of text really relate to the authors, but I feel like how you explained it, it would really teach me how with the whole paragraph and stuff. I think you did really good, and like what your Ross saying, like and like what Miriam was saying, like you could move on a little bit, so like you could get more information about what the author is thinking about the story. So I think I'm processing it a little bit, but you did good. Thank you.
Yes.
Is there anything Mariah did that you guys are going to try out when you go back to reading your articles?
Yes. I like how when she read the first part, like since she read the first part, she started her thinking off right there. But when she moved on to the next part, and she built up one whole thinking, that's what I'm gonna try to do. But I'm also go further more into the story and
Great.
think of one big perspective.
So she's building her ideas across sections. That's what I'm hearing you say. That's great.
I think like I'm gonna end on Tim and I'm really sad because I'm gonna try to do the same thing because like it's a hard time and like she was giving her suggestions to move on and read on to read more about the article. So I think I'm gonna try that out too.
Great. Joelle, is there anything different you saw Mariah do that you're going to try out?
Something different that I saw Mariah do was how she used two paragraphs and compared them to figure out the author's perspective.
So insightful.
Okay. So I think, again, that there are some powerful takeaways that we can generate from that video, that it really was an exercise in metacognition. We understand and recognize the power of modeling for students, our own thinking process, but I also think that sharing that with students who are able to demonstrate that learning, legitimizes all of the work that they have been doing as learners in the classroom. Another huge thing for me here was that we asked students, well, I think one funny thing was that they had just had a lesson on using transition words, so they continued to use furthermore throughout the entire conversation. But also that we asked the students to give Mariah feedback on the lesson as well, and that we asked them to name the strategies that they could use now in their own reading. So we hope that this process of asking students to be able to teach their own thinking and their own ideas is elevating their own learning experience. And Kim is going to take the time now with us to explore that idea more in depth. And I'll just pause here really quickly one more time. Vivian, are there any questions that people have or comments or anything like that to share?
Hi there, Chantal. I have a tweet from Sarah Ahmed. She says, love seeing focus on secondary students and their work. Go Chantal and Kim.
Thank you.
Yes. At this time, that is the tweet I have to share.
Okay, great. So we're going to move on to Kim now.
Hello. All right. Hi. All right. Okay, so, okay. I am still seeing Chantal's screen. Is that what I should be seeing?
Oh.
There we go. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, as long as you see me, I guess that's all that matters. So I'm going to talk about my AP Literature class this year, and this is a group of 12th grade students. It's a group of young men and women who are very interested in using literature as a vehicle through which to examine their own selves, identities, and their place in the world. Many of them this year have had transformative experiences while reading the texts that we've studied, which got me thinking about their thinking and how to best help them make these connections stronger and more valuable. About midway through the first semester, I had the students develop their own essential questions as a lens through which they would study the text. That was very successful as the students worked in small groups discussing how their essential question related to the different texts, sometimes adapting their questions along the way so it would more connected with the literature. Then at the beginning, between the two semesters, we have the short break where they do the roundtables that Chantal had mentioned. Half the class was given Metamorphosis to read, and the other half the class was given Chronicle of a Death Foretold to read. And they came back on the first day of the second semester and met in their groups, and they created 3 essential questions which they gave to the other group along with a new book. So they basically designed the inquiry questions for the other group to read the book they had just finished. And then we all came together a week later and had a Socratic seminar discussing the 2 books and the questions that they had come up with. So the second semester really started off with student-driven thinking and inquiry. And then the next unit, which we just wrapped up, was a short story unit focused on examining how different authors present the human condition. And what I did in this unit is I partnered up 2 students with each text. So the whole class was reading the same text for each day, but 2 students were responsible for the actual teaching of the lesson. So for the 2-week study, each day, 2 different students were teaching. They had to create the lesson, and I sat back and was a student. So what I'm going to do now is show you 3 different chunks of lessons, and then we're going to watch a video where the students talk about the process of being teachers and students sort of simultaneously. So I'm going to screen share real quickly. Okay, so this is okay. So these are the student design lesson plans. And again, this is the hashtag if you want to send in any comments or questions, hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering, and then the number 3 with a space right there in between. Okay, so the first lesson was Nilda. This was actually the last lesson that was taught in the unit, but this is Nilda. The story was Nilda by Junot Diaz. The lesson was created by Michael Paulino and Timothy Lopez. And this is what they gave to all the students. What exactly is going on in this story? In your respective groups, begin discussing the differences between the relationships developed with Nilda as they relate to both Junior and his older brother. And then fill in the Venn diagram with differences and similarities that make both relationships positive, negative, or somewhat in between. Then they gave these guiding questions for people to think about. So basically, we were all in small groups of about 3 or 4, and we discussed these 4 questions, and then came back together as a whole class and sort of shared different ideas to fill in the Venn diagram. Michael will explain that a little bit more in the video as well. Another lesson was on A Good Man is Hard to Find by Flannery O'Connor. This lesson was designed by China Krauser and Ricardo Merlin. What they did was a station activity, so they sort of had 4 mini lessons in one. Everyone participated in each station, so there was time. It was timed. In the first station, you were asked to draw what a psychopath looks like, and in station 2, you had an open discussion about manipulation, connecting it to both the story and society. In station 3, we were given scenarios and asked to do what would we do to see, and that was in China in the video. We'll talk a little bit more about the intent of the scenarios, but it was sort of to get us to question where we fell on the manipulative / psychopath spectrum. And then station 4 was quote analysis. So they gave us this final quote from the story, and we had to analyze it. Then after we had gone through all these stations, again, we came back as a whole class and sort of shared what we had found and discussed in each station. And then the final lesson was focused around Midnight Basketball by Sherman Alexie. And this was designed by Jocelyn Pena and Matthew Marcotte. So their theme they focused around was to try and conquer the impossible. And the point of this class is to understand Big Ed's frustration in basketball, but his persistence to keep going, and empathize with Joey when he supports Big Ed. So they had a little cute do now, getting us thinking about challenges, but then they had this very well-developed activity. Here are the directions. There was a task A and a task B, and everyone has to complete A and B. The difference is that you'll see, if you see here at the bottom, the objective is to complete all of the tasks, while the catch is that part B is exponentially harder than part A. So Jocelyn will explain that a little bit in the video, but you see there's a lot of different ways that there was 8 lessons overall. So no, 9 lessons overall. So this is just 3 of them, but you see a wide range in how they decided to approach the text. I'm gonna now go to the video of them thinking about their thinking even more, where I asked them to sort of discuss how they came up with their lesson plans, how it felt to be the teacher and the planner, how it was different than just being a student, and then how it was to participate in student design lessons. So I'm going to play that video now and unplug my headphone.
A lot of the lessons that we went through as Eastsiders in the past. And we found that a lot of those lessons revolved around like group discussion first, so that everyone could get ideas, and then bringing it back together as like a class, so everyone could like spread the knowledge that they obtained reading the book for themselves. And also just changing the way we read Nelda, not as like students trying to prepare for a lesson, but just thinking about broad questions we could ask to like start like planting seeds for them to like grow the ideas that they can talk about in the group discussion. Yeah, I guess me and Tim decided to work on, or try to implement, like things that worked for us as students. Mm-hmm. And what both of us decided was that some sort of group discussion along with a visual that we can show up in front of the board and make it something similar that each of them can contribute to. And the way we decided to do that was we decided to make a Venn diagram. And we also gave each student a Venn diagram with the same thing, so that as they're talking about those ideas in the group discussion, every group should have something different. Or at least if they're the same, we could put up those similarities up on the board, and then everyone can follow along at different paces. And they could, if one group has a good idea then that the other group doesn't have, then that group would start talking about it, and that's how we could like really delve into the things that were important to the story.
When you see other people's lessons, you see like you go into their head on like what was important to them in the whole entire like story. So Michael focused on Rafa and Junior, which like in my mind, he's like trying to find the difference and the similarities between them and why they were important. But if I was to do the lesson, I would have focused on Nelda. Or when they were trying to figure out what was their like lesson, I tried to tell them like an advice column for Nelda, like what she should do, like when she's in these situations. But then when they focused on Rafa and Junior, it made more sense because those were even though Nilda was a really big character, those are like the two main characters that like affected Nilda and that are the ones that needed to be analyzed.
The first station, from what I remember, was we had the class draw whoever was in the station draw what a psychopath like. The second one was discussing, I believe, manipulation. The third one were different scenarios and how each student would react. And then the fourth one was analyzing a quote, and that was taking together all of the lessons that we did at Eastside and just putting them into one. So we often do quote analysis in class, and we're often told to do certain draw a psychopath, but we're often told to define something that might be more stereotypical than other things. My partner came up with half of what the lesson was about. So I came up with the manipulation station, because the main attribute to the old lady was manipulation, and how she kept trying to say you wouldn't kill an old lady, would you? And she just kept trying to stay alive because of that. And the quote analysis at the end where I forgot what the psychopath said, but I thought of that, and I was just well, this could be powerful, but how would other people interpret this? Because I interpret it one way, let's see if someone else did it a different way. To say that it's also kind of when you're reading the story, knowing that you have to teach a lesson in the next day or the next 2 days. It's you try to be one step ahead of the story, so you see something, you're wait, can I make a lesson out of this? And then you keep going, and it's just but wait, is this part more important than this part? Should I make a lesson about this part, or should I stick with the one from before? And then it's well, what kind of lesson can we wrap around that? Should I with the station, that was because there were 4 different stations, I was able to pick 4 different parts or 4 different aspects. But if it was someone that was just doing a lesson on just manipulation, they would probably have done it a different way. So with my lesson, I learned from the students, which is definitely a major part of teaching, because people said different things and all these different intellectual ideas, and they're wow, I didn't even think of that, and I'm teaching you something, and you just blew my mind with this thing that I've never even imagined, or something like that.
The way I constructed my lesson was to find something that was engaging, that was fun, but also knowledgeable and educational. I focused mainly on the big lesson in Midnight Basketball. It involved a lot of teamwork, and in order to move on to the next stage, each team had to show moral support and continue to show support to fit the role of what Big Ed and Joey did in Midnight Basketball.
Okay, good.
Big thing I took away about it was that there's so many different methods to teach the same kind of thing. So each of us more or less decided to do different things in order to try to get our message or our point across to the people we were teaching. So most of us chose either videos, or some of us chose group discussions, or Jocelyn went into a whole carnival event. But each of those ways, even though they were so different, they always ended up getting the message across, and they always ended up trying to make us to think about the story and actually break it down into parts that we can actually analyze and stuff. But pretty much even though everyone did different things, they just showed the different methods that are possible to get the point across. There's not just one right way to learn, but there's also different things that you can go to, and different lenses that you can go to just look at the same kind of text to get different things from it.
Okay, so I am going to go back to full screen. Okay, hold on. All right, we went into the vortex there for a minute. So yeah, the video I think sort of speaks volumes about where our students get by 12th grade in terms of metacognition, and them thinking at the end, one of the prompts I gave them was how prepared do you feel to, how well do you know yourself as a learner, because these students are all going off to college in a few months, and I want them to be instilled with the confidence that they know what they need to do to successfully make sense of a text. And I think that they were able to really exhibit that in the video. So I know that we have just a few minutes, so if there are any questions or if Chantal wants to add anything before we wrap up.
Wait.
You just muted yourself, Chantal.
Oh, technology.
Vivian, have any questions come in or anything?
I do have, excuse me, a question from Anna Osborne. She says, love the idea of roundtables where students defend learning for semester, organized through certain classes, question mark?
Yes, yes. So the roundtables are organized by each teacher. So at the, if you're taking U.S. history, dramatic literature, biology, and Algebra 2, you're going to have a roundtable at the end of each semester in all 4 of those classes. So during the week that most New York City school students are taking standardized tests, our students are participating in these roundtables in every class, and different teachers format them in different ways. The math department tends to format it in a very particular way, but in the English classes you'll see a wide variety that includes the reflective cover letter and then some sort of on-demand activity depending on the content of the class, question and answering, showing of work, and sort of defending what they've learned.
I think Anna also mentioned it would be great to be able to witness a single student's roundtable discussion in both the fall and the spring. And yeah, it's been really powerful to be able to witness their growth from January to June, and even really across the years, to be able to track students' progress in that way as well. So you're right, definitely a powerful opportunity for that.
Okay, ladies, thank you so much for your sharing so much of your insights and experience with us today. Is there anything else you would like to share before we close?
No, we hope you enjoyed the presentation and that it generated some ideas for you and what you're probably already doing in your classrooms and schools.
And also feel free to reach out if you want to come visit Eastside Community High School. Welcome guests anytime. Yep.
Great, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Viewers, I just wanted to, as we close out, mention that coming up next we have a few sessions, and I will go ahead and share those screens with you right now. In the next workshop we have coming up, workshop number 6, Kristen and Katie will talk about amplifying digital pedagogy for today and tomorrow. Rasul and Molly will talk about re-engaging our struggling learners strategies for reading and writing. We also have another session by Rosalind and Chris, crafting details, teaching students to elaborate and add details, and Catherine, Hale, and Kelly will be speaking about teaching writing and identity through series blogging. So that is coming up starting at noon. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you again to Chantal and Kim for talking to us about empowering readers through agency and metacognition. Remember that you could continue the conversation about the session we've just participated in by continuing to tweet at #TheEdCollabGathering3. Thank you.